Good morning. This is Dennis Falloon, and I'm the District 7 Safety Coordinator, and I'd like to welcome you to the 8th District 7 Safety Academy webinar, benefit cost calculations plus the net present value calculation, and that'll be discussed with the new work program guide from FDOT. This will be presented by, as Anthony mentioned himself, Anthony Chamont. He's a PE. He works for Tyndall, Oliver & Associates, and he's a consultant for the District 7 Safety Office. This will be the last topic for 2013. The next one in this first series of webinar topics will be on January 8th, 2014, and new ones will begin for the second series in February. And notice will be going out to everybody, so you can register for those as we finish finalizing those topics. Just wanted to give you a little introduction, as I always do, and just so you understand what the Academy's purpose is. It's to provide information for the local safety programs regarding safety-related issues to enhance those local safety programs. And as I have mentioned previously, these began on October 23rd, 2013. Seminars run the topics run from 10 to 12 every Wednesday, and they'll end on January 29th, 2014. And the topics are a minimum of an hour and will be no more than 2 hours, and it will depend on the complexity of the topic. And you can register through SurveyMonkey through this website here, link, and you can also go through the district7safetysummit.org link and also register. And as Anthony had previously mentioned, this is the link, the last one there, completed sessions, which give you both the option of printing the presentation in PDF, or you can listen to the recording. As I mentioned, this is the last topic for 2013, and as you will see, there are 4 more left for this first series of webinars, and they start January 8th and run through January 29th, each Wednesday of the month of January. And as I mentioned today, it is DC calculations plus NPV calculations with the new work program guidelines. And as I've shown you all before, for those that have participated, this is my contact information. It is on emails. And so if anyone ever has a question, please contact me. Either call me or send me an email or send it to Anthony, and we will get you an answer. For that, Anthony, I'm going to turn it over to you. All right?
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Again, my name is Anthony Chamont. I work with Tyndall Oliver & Associates. I'm one of the District 7 safety consultants. Today we're covering BC and NPV, benefit to cost calculations and net present value, and the work program guidelines. Hopefully we have a good conversation and everything here goes along pretty well. There's a lot of well, Dennis already covered the workshop. Today's December 18th. This is where we're at, and again, remember there are no more webinars for the end of the year because of the holidays coming up. So, agenda, what we're going to cover today: what is benefit cost, what is net present value. We're going to go through the calculations sort of manually, how it is that those are calculated, so everyone understands the formulas, where they come from, and what you do with the numbers. And yes, there is a spreadsheet that calculates it all for you, but I really want everyone to understand how the values are generated and why we use them. And also, which one do we use? Do we use net present value? Do we use benefit cost? I have some fun with numbers that we'll do at the end to kind of show the plus and minuses of each one of them. So hopefully we have a good conversation about all this stuff and everyone understands. I really would like this webinar to be something that you can go back to this presentation and follow the example problem that I will do, because I'm going to calculate the net present value for for a particular example problem, I'll calculate the BC and the net present value, so you'll see where the numbers go in and where everything gets plugged in. So benefit to cost ratio, straight from the Highway Safety Improvement Manual. Benefit to cost compares all of the benefits associated with a countermeasure expressed in monetary terms to the cost of implementing a countermeasure. In practical terms, what that means is that, like the scale there suggests, you take all the benefits on one side of the equation, you take all of the costs on the other side of the equation. It's just a ratio between the two numbers. It doesn't know how much the improvements are. It just knows the ratio between them. If the benefit is more than the cost, it's a good project because you're gaining more benefit than you are spending in order to gain that benefit. The benefit here, we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's the monetary value that is saved by reducing crashes. We apply a monetary value to that, and the cost is just the cost of whatever the countermeasure is, the improvement, the construction cost, the educational efforts, whatever it may be. So how do we calculate the actual benefit? Typically, we use historical data in order to do this. We need the total number of crashes. We need to identify a crash reduction factor. We need to find a cost per crash. So with those values, we are able to estimate the annualized benefit. We want to take the money from the improvement and the money from the crashes and annualize them both so that we have something even to compare them both, time value over money, get them both for the same year. So the benefit is going to be the total number of crashes times the reduction that's expected by the improvement times the cost per crash. The total number of crashes, the custodians of the crash data in the state of Florida is DHS&V, the Department of Highway Safety Motor Vehicles. There are several places that you can get this information from them, whether that be law enforcement that fills out the crashes, whether it's a crash data management system used in the crash analysis reporting system, Signal 4. The point of this is just to get the number of crashes. You want to know everything that's happening at your particular study area, your particular location where improvements are planned. The crash reduction factor, CRF. We'll see the same CRF somewhere else, so be mindful that there's more than one thing that is called CRF in this whole process. Come from FHWA's Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. The website is there. It's the cmfclearinghouse.org. Crash reduction factors are multiplicative factors used to compute the expected number of crashes after implementing a given countermeasure. For example, you install backplates at a traffic signal, and I'm using this example on purpose. There's a certain crash reduction factor that's expected. Take the number of crashes at the intersection, you multiply it by the CRF, that gives you the number of crashes that are expected to be reduced. And this website, it's a little tricky. There's a wealth of knowledge and information out there, but the search terms are somewhat specific. When you're searching for things, there's times where you'll search something by one way, you have to search it for another way using different terms. Through experience, you'll learn to know what to look for. But once you get to a particular area, this is an example of what the install a traffic signal countermeasure looks like. This is within the subcategory of traffic signal control. You have a crash modification factor here. You have the crash reduction factor. You have a quality, which is a star rating. You have the crash type that should be reduced. You have your crash severity and your area type. So given given the thing that you're doing and the location that you're doing it at and your type of crashes, then you multiply the numbers here. So the crash reduction factor is expressed in the clearinghouse as the crash reduction factor is expressed in the clearinghouse as a number, but this is a percentage. So if you had 10 crashes and your crash reduction factor is 50%, you just multiply your crashes by 50% and you're expected to end up with 5 crashes that are being fixed. Crash reduction factors also can be combined because oftentimes we do more than one improvement, and this can be somewhat challenging to figure out which one we're doing if we're doing multiple things. Seldom do we go out and just, hey, we're going to do this one little thing. The improvement projects are more complicated. There's a method for doing that. Here's an example of one. If the crash reduction factor for improvements, if you have two improvements that you're doing at the same time at the same location, one has 25% crash reduction, the other one has 15% crash reduction. Is your crash reduction equal to 40%? You just add them? Well, no. You apply the formula. You take 1 minus the crash reduction factor, multiply them all together, and take 1 minus that to convert it back over. So the 25 plus the 15 is actually going to equal a 36% crash reduction factor. So they're weighted along the way when they're added. The cost per crash. The cost per crash comes from the crash analysis supporting system from CARS. This is a report that gets exported from the DOT mainframe, basically, and this table is generated. And it takes the crashes and divides them by facility type. You have the number of lanes. You have whether you're urban or suburban or rural. You have whether you're divided or undivided. And it's just the value of the crashes. This is an average of all the crashes, regardless of the injury severity of the crash. When we're using the historical crash method, as we are, the injury severity is not taken into account. There are other methods that include that, where you multiply it by some factors depending on the severity, but not for historical crash. Makes it pretty easy. It's just one number. You take all of your crashes, multiply it by your crash reduction factor, multiply it by your cost per crash. That gives you the money that you should be saving by those crashes being reduced. Important note, since this is the local agency, Traffic Safety Academy, we have a policy of using 50% of the state highway value of the crashes for local roadways. So here's a table that was revised earlier this year of showing the crashes, the monetary value for those crashes for the local roadways. So use these if you're doing a project that's not on the state highway system. So putting those things together, well, the cost, the total improvement cost of the project. This includes everything. This is your engineering estimate. It's got your structures, roadway, signs and markings, utility, maintenance of traffic, mobilization, design, everything. The entire cost of your project. This all needs to be taken into account. The expected life of the improvement is just a number in years, and your capital recovery factor for the other side of the equation. We did everything that we need for the benefit, and we'll go through an example of those formulas. This is the other side. What goes on the other side of the scale? The cost. These are the 4 items that you need. You need the cost of the improvement, the life of the improvement, and your capital recovery factor. This gives you your annualized estimated cost, which is just your improvement cost times your capital recovery. Capital recovery, by the way, is the other CRF. So we need to be careful when we're making spreadsheets and doing things, talking about this, when we use our acronyms to make sure that that's not crash reduction factor. This is capital recovery factor. Capital recovery factor just converts present value into equal annual payments over time. There's a formula for that. It just takes it so that it annualizes the value so that we can compare it to that average annual expected crash reduction. So practical example, kind of went through a lot of numbers there and a lot of things going back and forth. Let's calculate the benefit cost ratio for installing, for example, a traffic signal along an urban 2-lane undivided highway with the following annual crash history. It has 4 angle crashes, 1 left turn crash, 3 rear end crashes per year. Following the steps that we just went through, if we were to go back and look at our table, urban 2-lane divided highways have a crash cost on the state highway system of $102,000. If we go into the crash modification factor, we go back 3 slides, we see that the crash reduction factor for angle crashes is 77% for installing a traffic signal. For left turn crashes, it is 68%, and for rear end crashes, it is negative 58%. And that makes sense if we think about the way that traffic signals operate. Usually we reduce angle and left turn crashes, which are your high severity crashes, but we have a lot more rear end crashes at signalized locations. So we expect to have an increase in rear end crashes, but a decrease in our angle and left turn crashes. And we're okay with this. We want to trade those high injury crashes for the lower injury crashes. The way that the math works out, if we go back and look at that formula, it's 4 times the 77% plus 1 left turn crash times the 44% times 3 rear end crashes times the negative 58% times the cost of our improvement. Our expected annual benefit at this location is $199,000. That's the benefit, 1/2 of the equation. The other half of the equation, calculating the cost. I just made up $450,000 installing a new signal, so we're just going to use $450 for this example. We're going to say that we're expected to have a 10-year life out of it. I know that's a little low. We usually have our signals out there a little more. Our interest rate is going to be 4% for this example, and applying the capital recovery factor, inputting those values in here, we end up with a capital recovery factor of 0.123. So it is the $450,000 in today's money to install the signal times the capital recovery factor that gives us the annuity for those values over the 10-year life cycle. We end up with an annual cost of $55,000. $55,000 is less than $119,000. So when we calculate our benefit to cost ratio, it's 199 divided by 55,000. We end up with 3.58. This project, if it was real and all the numbers were accurate, would be a good project. It has a positive benefit to cost ratio. Benefit to cost ratio is greater than 1 or projects that are good. We like to look for projects, especially on the local roads, that are greater than 2. So there's 2 caveats to the benefit to cost calculations on local roads. That is 50% of the crash cost on the state highway system is used, and the benefit to cost ratio that we like is greater than 2.
Anthony, you have a question from Rudy.
Yes.
He says, should go ahead.
Should annual maintenance costs be included? Yeah, absolutely. You can include additional maintenance costs, and that's actually in the spreadsheet. I was going to talk about that in my second to last slide when I get down there. But if you have, in order to truly include all the costs, yeah, I mean it's everything, including the maintenance of those. So yeah, I mean it should be included. We tend not to in most of the calculations that we've done for the safety summit for those projects. I guess the assumption is that relative to the improvement cost itself, the maintenance cost is lower. But you're absolutely right; it should be included. Work program instructions. The revised work program instructions state in Chapter 31, Safety Section B, page 2, that net present value basically is what's going to be used for determining whether a project is eligible for the highway safety improvement projects funding. The net present value needs to be greater than 0. There's a few caveats to that are in the same section. It says projects not meeting the net present value that have supporting documentation will be evaluated on a case-by-case. And all these projects that do not have a net present value greater than 0 will require approval from the State Safety Office. So although it is possible, it's going to be very difficult to justify these projects because there's just so many locations out there that will have a net present value greater than 0. Acquisition of right-of-way. the acquisition of the right-of-way should be limited only to projects to require to alleviate the immediate safety problem. So typically, the right-of-way is not used for these, and they also may not be used. The funds may also not be used to purchase automated traffic enforcement, unless it is something for school zones, like those speed feedback signs and things of that nature. So these are some changes that are coming from FDOT in the work program instructions. So what is net present value? Those financial calculators have a button that says NPV. What is it? This expresses the difference between the discounted costs and the discounted benefits of a safety improvement project. The primary difference here between benefit cost ratio, which is just a ratio of benefit to cost, this is the difference between the two you subtract. So it's the sum of the discounted benefits over the life of the project subtracted from today's dollars of the estimated cost of the improvement. Let's see how those numbers work. Two basic purposes for this, according again to the Highway Safety Improvement Manual, that is to prioritize for projects. So we like to find the most cost-effective means of using the funds. Projects with the highest net present value will be given highest priority, and it just determines whether or not projects are economically feasible. Again, the discussion of the net present value needs to be greater than 0. So how do we calculate this? The total benefit, it's the same as before. We have the number of crashes, the crash reduction factor, the cost per crash. I won't go through all of those calculations again because we did them a minute ago. The only difference here is that we need, once we calculate the average annual benefit, we apply a discount rate to them. There's a formula for the discount rate, creating a table for each of the years for the improvement, applying the discount rate to those and summing it. So it's the sum of the discounted benefits for each year. That'll become much clearer when I show the example. But it's just that average benefit, because once you apply a countermeasure, that countermeasure is there for the life of the project, and the benefit is not just in the first year or the second year. The benefit is throughout the entire life of the improvement that was installed. And the discount rate is just to take, time value over money, taking the interest rates and turning that into today's money and then summing the improvement over the whole life of the project. So an example, same scenario as before, but now we're calculating the net present value instead. Calculate the net present value for installing a traffic signal along urban two-lane, urban divided highways with the following annual crash history. And this is again on the state highway system. 4 angle crashes, the same 1 left turn crash, and 3 rear end crashes. The same as we did before. To get to the 199, we look up in the table for the improvement or for the cost per crash. It's 102 for that urban two-lane undivided roadway. The same crash modification factors that we looked up before from the crash modification factor clearinghouse, 77, 60, and minus 58. We apply the formula. We end up with the same 199 that we did before. Here's the part where you apply the the discount factor. So in year 1, the discount factor is 0.962. The 199 improvement becomes 191. In year 2, the discount factor is 0.925. The benefit, today's value of the benefit for that improvement is 184. In year 3, the improvement is 0.889. It's 177,000. You do this over the 10 years that we assumed that this improvement is going to last, and you sum the last column, or the last row, the discounted benefits, the 191 plus 184 plus 177. You end up with $1.6 million for the sum of the benefits of the improvement over the life cycle, the discounted sum of the benefits. The total improvement costs that we had calculated or assumed before was $450,000, and we're going to go ahead and, for Rudy's sake, say that $450,000 includes maintenance. And all we do is subtract the two values. 1.6 million minus 450,000, we end up with 1.1 million net present value. So good. This is a very good project that has $1 million net present value on the improvement. So BC of 3 point something, I forget what the number was, and net present value of 1.1 million. So is there an easier way? Yes, absolutely. There's an easier way. There's the spreadsheet that I'll make available. The spreadsheet also I'll create in the local traffic safety Tampa Bay traffic safety website. I'll create a resources document library and upload this spreadsheet to it. But these are the values actually for the same example problem that we went through a second ago. And I will talk through the spreadsheet because there's a few things in here. First, the crash types. We have a section in the spreadsheet for just your fatal and serious injury crashes. There's a 3-year history. This is where crashes per year, however many crashes are happening, are typed. The crash reduction factor is typed in here. I assumed for simplicity's sake that all of my crashes were property damage only. So I typed angle crashes. We had 4 per year in our example problem, so I put 4 in every single one of the columns, and we had a 77% crash reduction factor. 77% goes in here. When you multiply those out, that comes out to be 9.24 crashes to be prevented. The yellow boxes in the spreadsheet are boxes where you as a user type numbers. All the gray boxes are automatically calculated for you. Left turn crashes, 1 per year, 60% reduction. We have a 1.8 reduction of crashes. Rear end crashes, 3 per year, minus 58. We're increasing 5.22 crashes per year. So what we end up with is 5.82 crashes that are being subtracted. That times the cost per crash of $102,000 is what yields the $199,000. Here's the $199,000 that we calculated in the previous example. The interest rate goes in here. This is also called as the discount rate. It is you use both as the interest and the discount for the capital recovery and for the for moving the money in time. The improvement cost. Here's actually change in maintenance, Rudy. You see change in maintenance. You can type the value in there, and it increases the maintenance. For simplicity's sake, though, I just went ahead and put everything under one column. $450,000, 10 years of life. Here's that 0.123, the same value that we showed in the manual calculations. Cost per year, $55,000. So down below, your benefit to cost ratio, we'll take your 199 divided by 55,000. You have 3.58. Net present value is able to take into account the fact that today is 2013 and an improvement will not necessarily be completed by 2014. So it takes into account the maintenance, or I'm sorry, not the maintenance, the construction time for an improvement, and begins and begins counting the value at the end of the life cycle. For this particular project, I assume that it was going to be built in 1 year, but if you have a project that's going to take longer, you punch in the value into here of the year that it's going to be completed, and it will discount the 10-year life cycle beginning the year after the value that is included in here. The project net present value, here's the $1.1 million that we came up with the previous example.
Anthony, before you go off this form, you have a question?
Is there an accepted uniform value for I? We've seen both 3 and 4 recently. We've been using 4% in District 7. This may vary agency to agency. I don't know if we can have, we'll ask Joe Santos. I saw that he was on the line earlier to verify that this is still the value that we're using, but we've been using 4% in District 7. Is there an accepted uniform value for the life of the improvements? There's a table out there somewhere that has a couple of different improvements. It's basically based on resurfacing projects. You resurface a road every so many years, you replace a signal every so many years, you replace signs every so many years. There's a table out there that has it. But we tend to use 10, 15, 20 for most of the values. We don't get down to, this is going to be 8.5 years, when it's going to last. But yeah, I forget where the table is, but I can try to dig that up and provide it for everybody as well. Joe Santos chimed in on the chat. He says 4% should be used for the interest rate. So that is the accepted and recommended value coming from FDOT. Thank you, Joe. Peter chimed in as well. 4% was a suggested number from FDOT headquarters.
For statewide.
For statewide, yeah. So that is the number that we're currently using for the interest rate. Dave's chiming in as well. 4%. This spreadsheet has more things to it. At the top, there's a section where you type in the project and the improvement and where you're getting the numbers. You document the capital or the crash reduction factors and all these things. But this is just a section that pertains to the project. I have another version of this where I've basically taken the entire spreadsheet and moved the cells around and turned it into a single row, so that if you're doing improvements and you want to compare multiple projects, you just type all the numbers and drag the formula down, and it calculates this for multiple projects. I can't share that with the group as well if anybody's interested. But if you're doing one project, this is where the values go, and this is how the numbers are calculated. So hopefully this will serve as a good example of you following the project, the little sample project that I came up with, following the formulas and knowing where the spreadsheet is coming from and how those things are calculated. Hopefully that helps out. There's a few things that fun with numbers. This is what I wanted to discuss. Why this illustrates very, very clearly why it is that we're going to net present value. We have here a sample, just random numbers I made up, $100,000 crash cost on both sides for two different projects that we're comparing. We have a 20% crash reduction factor on both. We have a 10-year life cycle on both. One is a much bigger intersection. So we have twice as many crashes. So we double the crashes from one to another. And because it is a much more complex, more challenging intersection, we're also going to double the improvement costs. All things being equal except for doubling the number of crashes and doubling the improvement costs, because benefit to cost is a ratio, the BC for these comes up to be exactly 2.71 for both projects. However, the net present value for the smaller project is $708,000, whereas the net present value for the larger project is $1.4 million. So in this particular case, depending on the amount of funds that are available, if we can afford the $1 million improvement, this is the better project to pick. There are other questions in the chat. Sure, Jim. Send me an email. My contact info will be at the end of the presentation, and if there's any changes to those policies or updates to the spreadsheets, I will share them with you. Well, since we are having fun with numbers, though, I kind of wanted to reverse this and show that with net present value, the thing that really affects the net present value the most that I found is the 10-year life cycle, the life cycle of the project. If we readjust those numbers and we have the same $100,000 crash costs, the same doubling of the crashes, 15 versus 30, 20% crash reduction, the same doubling of the improvement costs, but for whatever reason, the larger project has a 10-year life cycle and the smaller project has a 14.0607 life cycle, the net present value is identical for both, $442,000, but the benefit to cost ratio is higher for the smaller project, 2.12. So the point of that is that there's a bit of an art to this. It's not just one's better all the time than the other. I would say that most of the time, like 90% of the time, net present value, the higher net present value actually does give you the better number. In District 7, I believe we're going to continue to calculate both just because there'll be instances like this where we have similar net present values, and one will have a higher BC, and we'll lean more towards doing the higher benefit to cost ratio project. I like to think of these personally as benefit to cost ratio is a filtering criteria. You determine, as District 7 does with their local projects, benefit costs must be higher than 2.0 for local roadways. So no project is considered if it's less than that. Now, once you have all of your projects that meet a particular benefit to cost ratio, you sort by your net present value, and you pick the one with the best net present value. So I see them as a filtering and a sorting criteria. That's just my interpretation of how the numbers work out when I've played with my spreadsheets. John Temple is chiming in and saying that FDOT Office of Design has a service life table for various improvements. It can be found in their benefit to cost analysis template on the InfoNet. Thanks, John. Yeah, I've seen that table before, and I should have included it in this presentation, but I forgot. I forgot where it was, but it is the Office of Design. I appreciate you chiming in. So some final thoughts on here. Again, net present value and benefit costs are both an art and a science. This is not cookie cutter. Going into the crash modification factor clearinghouse is somewhat challenging. You will see at times there's many. The crash modification factor clearinghouse is determined by actual before and after studies that are done throughout the nation. So there's some have different results than others, and some are vetted, some are better than others. That's what that star rating is. You want to pick ones that have the higher star rating. So it requires judgment when to pick your crash modification. This is why I mentioned earlier backplates. I forget what the exact crash modification factor is, but for signalized intersections, if you install backplates where there are no backplates, the crash modification factor that was found in that before and after study is something to the magnitude of 13% of all crashes. And if you were to use just the numbers and the raw data and not think about what you're doing, you could just about justify blowing up an entire intersection and rebuilding it if you have enough crashes at an intersection that does not have backplates for the sole purpose of installing backplates. But, that doesn't pass a smell test if you use your judgment when you're looking at these projects that doesn't quite fit. So we need to think about doing this. It's not just look at the numbers, this is what it says, and let's do it. It needs to make sense. What we're doing actually needs to make sense. And as with combining crash modification factors, complex situations may require some manual calculations. You may need to, combine some of these things and do a composite weighted crash modification factor. So it's tricky. It's both an art and a science. We do a lot of these. And if you have any questions, of course, contact FDOT for technical questions and tips. Those guys are really good at doing this stuff. They know what they're doing, and they can help you out. With that, I'll open the floor to questions. If anybody has any others, I can go back to any slide if anybody has any questions about
Anthony, this is Dennis.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something to everybody.
Sure.
In District 7, like Anthony mentioned, you can contact the District 7 Safety Office for assistance in making these calculations. But the District 7 office also has a safety team which consists of consultants, which are their ambassadors that work with the various counties and local agencies in District 7. And so those folks are also available to help assist in the calculations for the BC and the MPV calculation. So don't feel like you're out there on your own and you're struggling with something related to that, so you can get the help.
Scott asks a great question. Is there a way to account for the different costs of different types of crashes? There is a way, but not using historical crash data. There are tables out there, and FHWA puts them together for the costs. This comes out of CAR as well, out of District 7, for the cost of crashes based on their injury severity. But but the way that we do them with the historical crash data is just doing averages. So it's the average cost of the crashes by the roadway facility type, urban, suburban, divided, undivided, number of lanes, and limited access or not. So it's one cost per crash. Something that we've been somewhat lobbying for with that makes it particularly challenging, and I don't know if this was going to be your follow-up question, but bicycle and pedestrian crashes, it makes it somewhat difficult in our experience to justify improvements doing these methods for bicycle and pedestrian crashes, because we're taking the average cost of vehicular fender benders and we're applying those costs to bike and ped crashes. But bike and ped crashes have a much, much, much higher injury severity per crash. So their actual cost is much higher than would be the cost of statewide vehicular crashes. So right now, I mean, this is the methodology that we have, and we're using those average costs, not including the injury severity of the crashes, or not including, separating out and applying a different cost to your bike and ped crashes. Joe has posted something in the chat. I'm going to open that up and share it with everybody. I believe it's a link, so you can just click on it. There's a table. I will share my screen. This is the table that Joe has. Oh, fantastic, Joe. So here we have by roadway facility type as well, and by injury severity. So is this something that's when this is coming on the pike, Joe? Are we going to be able to use this for the 2014 projects that we developed for the Safety Summit? If I can find Joe, I can unmute you. Joe Santos, unmute. I can unmute District 7 as well.
Yes, Peter had a comment too, but not related to that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Peter was saying that the Excel file created by District 7 can be used in all Florida areas. I mean, the formulas are what the formulas are, and they're not locked or anything, so you're welcome to go in there and check our work to make sure that the formulas are correct. They should be. But these tables can be used elsewhere. I mean, the formulas, if there's a slightly different formatting because of the agency that you happen to be working for the district that you're working for, then those changes can be made to the Excel file, depending on the preference of your safety engineer. Just a reminder, one more time, the next webinar will be on January 8th. That will be on safety projects and the local agency program, LAP. Larry Taylor, I'm assuming, will be presenting on this topic. I don't have the names of the presenters on here.
On the 8th will be, of January will be Larry Taylor. Correct.
Larry Taylor will be presenting on January 8th. Larry's a wealth of knowledge, so do make sure to attend that webinar. And my contact info if anybody has any questions on anything that was covered today.
guess there's no more questions.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a dry topic. Just we go through the formulas, go through the example, look at the spreadsheet, make sure everyone understands that it's good. All right, well, if there are no more questions provided in the chats, I will go ahead and end the recording. I will stay on the line if any other questions or anything comes up. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.